Hey guys, this is Gottbeard. I noticed with the recent Thieves Guild change to Sorc's pet heal, there's a clamor in the community for information about how do I pet Sorc heal. As somebody who has raid healed on Sorcerer in the competitive NA scene for about the last half year, and somebody who has healed on Sorc off and on in just regular veteran dungeons since the beginning of the game, I feel like I'm in a good position to answer any questions that you guys might have. So I decided to make this Pet Sorc Healer guide and use my experience to help you guys out. Now, just a quick aside, of course, like the video if you like, share it if you want to, subscribe, all of that noise. Subscribers are going to have access to channel update videos that I plan on putting out. It sort of lets you know where the channel's going ahead of time before others do, so it's definitely handy to be subscribed. And also, I only plan on posting this to Reddit. I am old and I'm just an old man, and social media confuses me. Anyway, if you find a relevant forum and you want to link any of my guides really, you're welcome to do so. Nobody's going to be mad. If you are one of those people who want to sort of keep me to yourself and hoard the info, I understand that. But if you're one of those people that likes to just, spread the love and help everybody, just feel free to link this or any of my guides to any relevant forum. I don't have an ESO forum account, so just get that out of the way. Anyway, let's get right into the guide because we've got a lot of information to cover. Let's start with itemization. Now, immediately, the moment that they released this heal and everyone understood that it only scaled off mana, the pet heal, there was this clamor for asking for necropotence buffs and like, what do I wear? I'm so confused. And as somebody who's been down that road and explored it already, hold on, coffee. And as somebody who's already been down that road and explored all the options, I think that mana stacking is a trap. You really don't need to focus as hard as you think you do on this whole let's get my mana high so my pet heal is rad. As you can see here, this build has 41,495 maximum magicka. That's plenty. That's really all you need. You don't want to neglect your other combat stats just to get this Sorc heal up. However, there are hidden scalings to this heal that you might not first think of, which is why I run on my pet Sorc heal build Twiceborn Star. Now I have a full 5 pieces of the Twiceborn Star, all in Divines, and in fact my whole build is Divines. And for my stones I have chosen the Thief and the Shadow, both crit rate and crit damage up, affect and scale my pet heals as well as my damage as well as my other heals. It makes it to where I don't have to just invest in this pet heal and get no benefit towards anything else. This way I can invest in all of them at the same time, and that's the luxury that Twiceborn Star is going to give us. Now I will say as an aside, if you're swapping builds around a lot, Twiceborn Star can be a really annoying set to run because you have to constantly go and get your second stone again. I really wish the game would remember what your second stone was and just take it off and put it back on when you are wearing Twiceborn Star. As such, be real careful that you make a full Twiceborn Star on both of your bars, because if you ever break it, you'll lose that second stone and you will have to go back and manually get it, which is, not very good if you are in the middle of a raid. Excuse me. So, for my accessories, I run Willpower. Now, what enchants you want to go with on your Willpower accessories? I definitely think Willpower is absolutely the best set for a healer right now. So, I wouldn't really try anything else. But what accessories you go is really kind of up to you. It's a season to taste choice. But I would like to point out that I do have in my gear backup rings with different enchantments so that on the fly I can adjust my build to whatever the content is pressuring me to do. So if I need more mana management, I have a full set of Magicka Recovery willpower rings that I can swap in and out. The price on those has been driven down pretty far, where you can now buy these duplicates and get a little bit more of a versatile character, whereas before that might have been cost prohibitive. So I've done that. But generally you're going to be wanting to look at Magicka Recovery or spell damage on here. And the Magicka Recovery, it really is find that line for you. We all each have our different casting rates, and everybody's going to require a different amount of Magicka Recovery. I personally go with bar none, just very little Magicka Recovery, and then I use my spatial awareness and comfortableness with the build and teamwork to overcome mana management issues, so that I have more control over what I'm doing. I have a lot of hots in my build, and if my heals are powerful, I can set them out and they'll take care of everybody while I do other things. And I can't really do that if I spec into Magicka Recovery to make sure I always have mana. One way is definitely a more mastery way to play than the other, but you're going to perform better if you find your line. How much Magicka Recovery do I need to comfortably play? And then if you feel like that's too high, then pressure yourself as a player to get better and better at your mana management so you can shave it down as you go. But that's a process. You're only going to punish everyone if you put your Magicka Recovery too low and you're always out of mana and uncomfortable. Okay, so that's mostly the build. The last thing to talk about is these last 3 gear slots. And again, these are seasoned taste gear slots. I'm sure that many Magicka builds are getting used to this. You know, they get their 3-piece and their 5-piece and maybe a 1 or 2 monster helms, and then they've got this 1 to 3 slots, 1 to 4 slots sometimes if you're dual wielding, that they've got to, you know, just get anything they can get. It's not really even a build anymore at that point. It's just, what do I do with the leftovers? Okay, well, I can't exactly tell you exactly what to do with the leftovers, but I can give you a good idea of how you should think about placing them. Now, this build's not going to need anything from the stamina set bonuses available and nothing from the defensive set bonus available. So you're not going to go for armor or, you know, like a 1-piece or 2-piece armor or SR. You're definitely not going to go for any stam recovery, weapon crit, max stam. That's all a given. HP. Twiceborn Star already gives us 1 HP. You can see there on the 2-piece we get maximum health for it. So our HP threshold is actually a little bit higher than a standard glass cannon. You will not be the lowest HP in your raid, and in my opinion it's plenty. If you feel uncomfortable with your HP and you want to kick it up to that 20k, I almost recommend that you do it from your C menu over doing it with your gear, but you could put a 1-piece Undaunted Health in if you like. That's one of those things you're going to be constantly trying to whittle down. Get your HP as low as you can comfortably be. Higher HP in the beginning is a crutch for learning content. It really is. But 18,152 health is plenty for a healer. You definitely won't be the lowest HP healer. Moving on. So we're left with pretty much 4 relevant choices: spell crit, Magicka Recovery, spell damage, and max Magicka. So this is how those break down. Spell crit will scale everything that we do. However, we already are at an exceptionally high spell crit rating. It's a big part of our build. We won't really get that much from a single spell crit trait. You can definitely spec into double spell crit with your last 2 set bonuses, and it'd be pretty cool. You'd have an exceptionally high crit rate, but full buffed, I'm at a 70% crit rate. That's a lot. You really don't need it. Okay, Magicka Recovery, it follows the same rules as your accessory enchants. This is one of those things that between these last 2 set bonuses and your accessory enchants, you need to find what your resting rate cast speed is, get your rotations down, understand your fights, and get more familiar with your bar before you can really answer this question. If you're learning for the first time, I'd recommend, you know, at least 2 to 3 magical recovery enchants or set bonuses, a combination of the two somewhere. Just to give you that little extra magical recovery to learn, and then I would start to taper those off as I went along. Now, in my opinion, this is easiest done by the enchants, because you override it when you're ready to try it, or you buy an extra ring and then you keep the versatility on the fly. That's the way that I like to do it. But it's probably more efficient to do it through your sets, because you get a lot of spell damage off of these accessory enchants. So if you can preserve your accessory enchant spell damage, you're better off. So that's really up to you. Do you want to replace a Kuda, or do you want to replace a whole piece of gear? You know, your call. Last is the neck and neck. Which one's better for a Sorc healer, max magicka or max spell damage? And this is a really tight question. Spell damage is not going to scale your shields or your new pet heal. It will scale all the rest of your heals and your damage. So it does have some value, and it will scale them the highest possible. Max magicka will scale everything. Your shield strength, your new Sorc heal, all your other heals, all your damage, but it won't scale them as hard as spell damage scales the things that it does scale. So that's kind of your call. My own personal setup for this is to go Molokina 1 and 2 Torogs. I own 2 Torogs Precise Restoration Staffs and 1 Torog's Inferno Staff. This Inferno Staff is Nirnhoned. All of my heals are precise. Then I lace in this allows me the option of going double resto with no mutagen and resto destro with no mutagen, and then when I have the luxury of running mutagen, I lace in an off-bar maelstrom, and this does break my Torog set, making this a dead slot, but it's on the off-bar, and I get this mana return function when I go back to my main bar and mutagen's ticking out. So that's kind of the way that I've set it up. I personally chose spell damage over all of the other traits, and the reason why is because I felt like my shield strength is strong enough in PvE, and in fact I don't even use Hardened Ward in PvE now, but I'll get to that later. And this new Sorc heal is actually pretty stout already, so I don't feel like I need to invest in increasing it any further than I already have. Both the shield and this Sorc pet heal are both strong. I would rather invest in my damage and all the other little heals that I'm doing. So that's kind of my logic there. And this concludes the gear portion of this guide. Okay, let's move into the skill portion of the guide. Now for this, I'm going to start out just telling you my double resto daily setup. This is not for raids or anything. This is just something, a gear set that or a setup that I like, that I'm comfortable with for just your average project. I'm going to have Power Surge on during this, just for easy spell power buffs. I don't have to burn all my pots, but I would have Dark Exchange in this slot if I were actually running. So you might say, why Dark Exchange? Well, by keeping that on this bar, we raise the spell power that we have, making this our most strong Healing Springs bar. And Sorc DPS has gone the way of the dodo bird a little bit. Sorcs are constantly bowing out in exchange for playing other stronger DPS, and every class has a particular group buff that they give. Sorcs happens to be linked to dark magic, and is called exploitation. It's a minor prophecy buff to your raid, or your party. So I run Dark Exchange as a quick way to just get some mana, but also to give us 20 seconds of crit increase. And you can see here that it boosts me up to just under 70% critical, and on my off bar with my Maelstrom resto, I'm actually at 70% critical with that buff. So that's kind of the reasons for Dark Exchange. There really isn't another skill that I would put there. I mean, frags maybe, just so you could throw out some damage when you proc it. And it's sort of to taste. Restraining Prison is good for sort of group pulls. The snare is super nice, and one thing that you can actually do with restraining, just a quick aside, is you can bind the first start of a clump, making the back guys move into the bound guys and actually create a pretty clean clump that way. Clean clumps matter to healers because the tighter the clump, the more likely that everybody groups up inside your AoE heals. You have a little bit of control over that. So Restraining Prison can also go good there. Not really that great for boss fights though. So those are the 3 skills that I might think about proccing exploitation with. Having a Sorc skill on this bar is going to boost your spell power through the Expert Mage passive, so that's good to do. Anyway, back to Power Surge. Okay, so on my main bar, I have Illustrious Healing, Dark Exchange, the new heal pet, Bound Aegis, Inner Light, and Ice Comet. The ult is there for its passive mana regen and spell max magicka boost. The Inner Light is there for the crit boost and the max magicka boost. The Bound Aegis is there for the max magicka boost. The Restoring Twilight is there for its spike heal, and I already said why Dark Exchange is here. So let's talk about Illustrious Healing. Why do I have this morph? Well, you probably don't want to go with this morph. You probably want to go with Healing Springs, the common morph. The thing about Healing Springs is it's extremely mana efficient, making you not have to think about your Healing Springs spam. You can just spam it. And it's become an integral part of the healing meta because of this reason. You're not stressing your mana bar to spam these heals, which means whenever you go to do whatever you need to do, you're good to go. I have Illustrious because of the extra second tick in the higher heal scaling and my ability to do more with less mana. So it's really a skill choice for you. If you're exceptionally good at mana management, the more powerful heals and the higher threshold for stack heals can make Illustrious viable for you. Most people who try it don't like it and end up going back to Healing Springs. So this is just sort of a personal morph choice for me, and you might try it and see if it fits for you too, but I will warn you that unless you have exceptional mana management, you're going to not like it. Some things that we can do with Illustrious that we can't do with Healing Springs is pop down 2 Illustriouses and know that with the extra second and the higher heals, we've put the same amount of heals out as 3 Healing Springs. So we can actually just do 2 Illustriouses into a resto channel and repeat and maintain both our mana. Keep the new full resto channel now gives you major mending, so we can keep that buff up. And this is sort of a resting rate cast rotation that we can do that we couldn't really do with Healing Springs. There isn't enough time because Healing Springs has a lower stack rating. You have to refresh it sooner. So even though it's easier to spam, it forces you to spam. Whereas Illustrious, even though it's harder to spam, it gives you time. I can actually get 2 to 3 Illustriouses going and then be away doing things and then get back to the stack. I have more time to do things on my off bar. So that's basically part of the benefit of Illustrious over healing. Healing's 3 seconds will taper off very quickly, and you'll often find that you left your stack with no healing protection. So that's kind of the logic behind the first bar. Let's move on to the second bar. Combat Prayer is your group damage buff. It is very important that you keep this up on the majority of the group every 8 seconds. One way to do that is to count how many of your spam skills it takes to run your buff out. That's a way to subliminally track your buff timers. Just as you play around and practice, make each of your spam skills represent a time, and then sort of measure that time to the buff. That way you just get this feeling like, I know my buff's about to go down. Because in the middle of a raid, when there's like 40 of these stretching across the screen, looking for this little picture of the little stern man with the glowy eyes to find out how much timer it has left is not really that fun. You're better off just sort of intrinsically knowing in your heart of hearts that this buff's about to go down. So that's one of the tools that you can use to track that time, is to know exactly how many healing springs does it take before my combat prayer runs out. Anyway, you're going to want to get over to that off bar every 8 seconds to try to put that on the group. There's another thing worth noting about combat prayer. It actually is a snipe heal. This little yellow bed of light that goes out, it doesn't go out as far as the actual heal goes. The heal is 20 meters. It's also 8 meters, so it means it goes out about 4 meters to the left of me and 4 meters to the right of me, and it goes out 20 meters. So I can see a player there on the edge, I can look at him, and I can snipe heal him. Boom, you're good. Boom, you're good. So keep that in mind. Now that's less important now that we have this Twilight heal, but it used to be very important because that was our range spike heal. Moving on. Currently I have mutagen. Now mutagen, anytime you can get it on your bar is amazing. There's a rotation that I like to do where I springs, weapon swap, mutagen, springs, weapon swap, mutagen, springs. And so basically over time I get mutagen up on my entire group 24/7. And the weapon swapping and the mana return of my Maelstrom staff makes it to where I sustain mana without needing rest of the channels. Just through the time that it takes to do it, the extra tick on Illustrious gives me the time to weapon swap, put the buff up, and come back and not have my the threshold of my stack heals be threatened. So anyway, I love mutagen. It's great for trash pulls. If you're in a raid and you just want to pop it as many times as you can before you go into the trash, the kicker heal is going to save somebody's life. It's got great synergy with Maelstrom on the off bar. It's just a really good heal. It's cheap as all get out. And in the right circumstances, it can be an incredibly powerful heal. I have been completely out of mana in Hellraw hard mode when Starfall hit, and literally out-healed the Starfall with mutagen spams. You know, it's fun stuff. So on the off bar, we duplicate our Restoring Twilight and our Bound Aegis, but we don't duplicate our Inner Light. And the reason behind this is that they changed it from a toggle that needed to be on both bars to an active. So we really only need the benefits from this on our main bar where our main stack heal is. Our buff bar we're not going to be on very long at any given time, and it's usually there for a function, so we can drop it off of there and pick up an extra slot. Now you might say, why do I have Restoring Twilight on the back bar? Well, it's even though they're working out toggles, they're left one of the most crippling natures of a toggle on the Sorc pet heal, and that's that if you don't have it on your bar, it deactivates. I really wish ZeniMax had not done this. What's the point of working toggles out of the game if you're going to keep one of the most crippling aspects of a toggle on that skill? Pets should not desummon just because they're not loaded on the bar. They're not a toggle anymore. Please fix that. Anyway, because it acts that way, we now have to load Restoring Twilight on any bar, even our overload bar. Otherwise the pet deactivates and we have to resummon it. That is not acceptable, so you must load it on each bar. However, we did pick up that extra slot. I like to run Siphon Spirit in this slot. It's pretty easy to put up during lulls in combat. It lasts for a long time, 20 seconds, and it's great mana return for any build, not just elemental damage builds. As well as the healing on it, the Siphon Spirit heal is massive when you're actually like running the sets that I'm running with the mana that I'm running and the spell power that I'm running. So that is basically most of my sort of ready vet dungeon heal setup. Let's go to my overload bar. Now, this is not completely set up, so give me a second and I'll get it there. I like to run procstat. It's morphed to nevdet right now, but that's just because I didn't remorph my PvP build. But I like to run procstat there and the execute here. This gives me the option to go into a DPS phase as a healer and just unload an overload bar. It won't be as strong as a main DPS Sorc for two reasons. One, we won't have the elemental CP, and two, we're not running dual wield swords, so we miss out on that damage boost, but we still have a pretty hefty overload. And the effect of the morph returns mana every time we hit somebody. So like we get 1,161 mana back every time we hit the enemy, which makes this not only a DPS toggle but a sustain phase for us. We can end up pretty low mana and go here and start lobbing out these orbs of death and get our mana back pretty quickly, which is super nice. It makes probably Sorc one of the best healers for being able to slide into their DPS phase and get back out again. Now there was one problem with this early on or before, and that's that when we went into this phase we had no healing potential whatsoever. There's one significant change. Now that we have this pet, whenever we're in our offensive phase we still have a breath of life like heal, which is great. I mean, that's amazing. That means that we can do our DPS, and if anybody gets in trouble, we can spike heal them with this pet while we sustain our mana through our big giant lightning balls of death. And that's kind of that's something that you really need to use as a Sorc healer to sort of press that advantage of being able to do DPS cleanly. The procstat is there for group pulls and just extra passive DPS. You can get to your overload bar, prop your procstat, undo your overload bar, hit your combat prayer, and be ready for your heal bar in a group pull, and just explode the trash mobs when you finally get there. So the last thing to talk about here is our pet heal. So let's go ahead and summon our pet. So the way that this works now is we push the button to summon our pet, and if we push it again he desummons. The way it will work after the patch is the only way to desummon him is to swap to a bar without him on it. There he goes. Or to go to our C menu and right well, anyway, you'll be able to right click this buff and cancel it, just sort of how I can cancel my food buff. Right now it's not cancelable that way, but that will be the only way you can cancel it. Okay, so since you now don't unsummon it when you push the button again, what happens is there's a new kicker effect. There's a new effect for the skill. Essentially, the moment your little birdie woman is out, this button now does a different thing. And what it is it's a player side animation similar to the cleanse animation that will heal this winged birdie person and 2 allies for a percentage of your mana. It's an exceptional heal. It is a little bit expensive, and it's got good range on it. It's a wonderful tool that we just got, and it's what's starting this buzz craze about Sorc healer. Is it legit? Yes, it's totally legit. It was legit before, and now it's more than legit because we have this thing now. So, yes, it can crit. Let's see what else. The effectiveness of this heal is basically going to be modified by your ability to keep this little winged birdie alive. There's some problems with that, mainly that we don't have the tools that we need to position these pets very well, and their AI is kind of dumb, but they don't take very much damage from AoE, They're rarely single targeted, so the one thing you have to watch out for is one-shot mechanics, and in raids there's a lot of them, so be careful of that. Let me really quickly show you some ways that you can make that easier for yourself. Alright, so when we go down to combat options, you see here that we have command pet. So what this is it's a modifier button. If we're holding it down, then left click and right click now do different things. They don't do what they did before. As it stands, if you right click, the pet goes passive and flies to your side. If you left click a target, the pet goes aggro and will shoot at max range and leash whatever target as it moves. The way I think it should work is if you left click the ground while holding down the modifier and not a target, I feel like your pet should fly to that space. If they would make that change, it would give us more options over where our pet's positioned without interrupting sort of the feel of combat. So I really wish, like, if I held down the modifier and left click like that square over there, that there'd be a little X and my pet would come and start floating over to this spot. You know, maybe she won't stay there once she's, it would at least be something, some extra element of control. Now personally, I map this to 2 keys because in my brain I want, when I think about command pet attack, I hit middle mouse button and left click the target. When I think about command pet defend, I hold down alt and I right click. Those are 2 different paths in my brain, and it causes it to where I never misclick. You know, I always know when I push these different button setups what they're gonna do. This might not be for you. Maybe you play on controller and button slots are limited for you, but that's one of the tools that I use. So right now, because we don't have that little feature that I was asking for, if we want our pet to get out of the way of something, like say the serpent fight, his Sky Crusher Super Rocket of Doom alley-oop move, it's called World Shaper. Yeah, his World Shaper. Okay, so he's been throwing. He just went into poison phase. We're stack healing. We're healing our balls off. Now he's in tier phase and he's shooting little orbs at everybody. During tier phase, you actually have to back up while you're healing your people, and then get back in tell your pet to attack from out here, so that it stays, and then get back into the stack in time for World Shaper so that you can run out of World Shaper without your pet being screwed. Be real prepared in that fight to resummon your pet immediately after World Shaper. So pet positioning is important. Please remember it, learn it. Things to note, your pet will receive heals from you, so sometimes it's better to, if they're ground effect heals, sorry, they will receive heals from you if they're ground effect heals. Sometimes it's better to keep your pet passive just so it stays in the stack and can get healed. Your new pet heal will heal itself. That's worth noting. And this segues well into a question you might have of why don't I have Hardened Ward on my bar? Well, Hardened Ward is kind of a selfish clutch heal. It's extremely useful. It's a great clutch crutch, but it's something you should try to weed out, because in these fights the only thing that threatens you are really one-shots, and one-shots don't care about your shield. So if it's not going to protect you against that, then the only thing that's hitting you is stuff that you can out-heal, which means by understanding the fights, understanding your group, understanding positioning, you're in the same boat as everyone else. You can absolutely stay alive. If you can't stay alive off your own heals, then what kind of healer are you? It's better for you to learn the mechanics and be free of the clutch of Hardened Ward than it is for you to rely on it. It can stress your mana. Yeah, you could very easily leave you as somebody tanky and the last one left alive, but where's that going to get you? You're the last one left alive. It's much better to trust your group, learn the mechanics, learn where to stand, learn your positioning, get more familiar with your true heal rotation, and load an extra group buff in place of that Hardened Ward. So that's my thoughts on that. Now, it's kind of like, it's really like training wheels, you know, when you were a kid and your dad was teaching you how to ride a bike, and he put the training wheels on, you just glared at them, but then you got on the bike and it didn't fall over and it was kind of fun, like wee, but you still look back at those training wheels like, oh, I don't like the training wheels because that's not how Daddy rides a bike. And then you took the training wheels off when Dad wasn't looking, and you fell and like scraped up your elbow, and then you're like, okay, I like training wheels a little, but I really don't. I wouldn't be good enough to not use them. And then one day, you took them off and you wobbled a little, but you were riding a bike, and it was so great because you're riding a bike like Daddy. Yeah, that is what hardened board is. It's okay, it's good for what it is, stop your elbow from getting scraped up, but one day you want to heal like Daddy, so keep that in mind. So the last thing to talk about here is, as far as skills go, is raid healing. Now, really quickly, you can play around with your daily vet heal builds as much as you want. Pretty much your toggles are core. You want your inner light on your main heal bar, these two toggles on every bar, and then all of these slots are up to you. I would recommend keeping combat prayer and your twilight heal. In a 4-man group, it's much easier to rely on this heal now, and then you can sort of do what you want with the rest of it. You could run a destro staff and actually do crushing shock frags rotations and heal with your pet. The vet dailies are not crazy demanding, so use that time to explore all your kit, get more familiar with your kit and what options you could play, because the good players are always going to be moving their bars around, trying to taper their bars for the fights and the groups, looking at their group comp and going, okay, I have no elemental damage in this group, so I don't need elemental weakness and blah 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 blah. That's an important part of being a Sorc healer, is knowing that you can sort of play around with your kit. Recognize what's core and then just adjust the rest. So moving on to raid heals. So probably one of the most challenging things in raid heals is the group buffs. So let's list through the group buffs that we have access to. So we have under the Resto staff, Siphon Spirit. Under the Destro staff, Elemental Drain. This is mana return whenever you do elemental damage. Most raids want 2 of these up at all times on boss fights. We have Mystic Orb. This is like shards for mana. We have Combat Prayer. We've already talked about how wonderful this is. So these are all your group buffs, basically. There's one more group support skill that we don't have access to. It's Blessed Shards. We can't really solve that problem. Don't worry about it. Anyway, if you start to math out the bar slots, you notice that we can't get them all. We can load Mystic Orb here and have most of them on this setup. We can load a Destro Staff, move Mystic Orb to the off bar, load elemental weakness, Mystic Orb. Let's do that. Yeah. And Dark Conversion. Then reload Combat Prayer. Okay, so I'll talk about these really quick. This is a Resto Destro setup. You've got your Combat Prayer buff and your Illustrious Healing. The problem with this is that those are the only 2 heals you have. It really is plenty though. You're missing some of your HOTS and group support. So you have your Combat Prayer, you have your Illustrious Healing, and you have your Spike Heal here. You have your Pinch Spike Heal on your off bar. Why did I put that on there? 1 second. You have your Mystic Orb for group support. You have your Mana Management Dark Conversion and your group crit buff. And you have your Elemental Drain on your Destro bar. So this is another setup you can go. Essentially, most raid heals have 2 raid healers. And you're going to talk out with that other raid healer what buffs they're going to run and what buffs you're going to run. And once you put those buffs in and allocate them in the right slots, what's left over is going to be up to you. So whereas I'm kind of not telling you exactly what to load, I'm doing it for a reason. You need to be familiar enough with your kit that in a raid scenario, if someone says you don't have to run elemental weakness, you know what to do. You know, okay, well then I'll go double resto, I'll space my buffs out and create a buff bar, I'm gonna load siphon spirit, all of that. You need to be able to do that. Otherwise, you're gonna slow down your raid as you sort of tinker around over, like, well, what do I load here, and oh, well, should I load that, or, you know, get used to multiple bar placements, because what you load in a raid is going to change on the fly based off what other people can and can't do. Now, my own personal favorite setup when I am running a raid and I'm solo healing is to go closer towards my vet dungeon build and ask the DPS who are benefiting from elemental drain to run elemental drain. It's not a huge DPS loss for them to slot it, and it's a very quick skill to put in the rotation, and it lasts a long time, and they're the ones getting the massive benefit from it. So if you're a solo healer, then the group needs to sort of accommodate you, because you're taking on a lot of roles and there's not enough space on your bar to cover every group buff. So during that scenario, I actually like to set things up like this. And you can sort of pause the video if I'm going too fast on these placements. So we have the Mystic Orb, we have the Combat Prayer, we have our Spike Heal, we have Siphon Spirit. A lot of group buffs on our back bar. And then on our main bar we have our main heal, our Spell Crit Booster, and our Pet Heal. We're good to go. Anyway, being able to, there's basically two challenges that are going to sort of like set you up or make you fail here. Being able to rework your bar very quickly based off what the group needs, and then two, being able to go into your DPS phases and still main heal without screwing up. So those are things to practice. Luckily, Sorc has a lot of great tools now to achieve those results. And this concludes the skill portion of the guide, although we will talk a little bit more about skills later on. Okay, we're almost ready to move into the CP portion of the guide. Before I do, I almost forgot to talk about something Sorcs are going to have to wrap their head around now that we have a Spike Heal. Templars have already wrapped their head around this. Their Breath of Life is more expensive, it's less people, but it's great for healing people outside the stack. However, they can get themselves in trouble by over-babysitting people outside the stack, neglecting their stack heals, and causing a raid to wipe. You have to get used to this concept and develop this skill yourself as a Sorc heal. Now that you have an expensive Spike Heal for that, to use as a tool for that scenario, you have to get used to the idea of how much babysitting is too much babysitting. At what point am I neglecting my stack? My own advice to you is, if somebody has bad positioning and refuses to get where the heals are, yes, use your Twilight to give them a chance, but do not overheal. It's better for them to die and learn from their mistakes than it is for you to mismanage your mana and your stack heal timing and let your whole raid wipe. This is mainly in a raid scenario, less in a daily vet scenario. But you're better off, the future of your raid is better off if you let those people suffer their own consequences. Do not sit there and spam your Atro heal until you're out of mana and then cause your whole raid to wipe. Develop this skill. Learn when to use what. Now, there are roles that pull people out of the stack in raids where they have to go do this over there, and yes, it will be your responsibility to help heal those people outside the stack, but you need to find the balance. Find the balance between maintaining your own mana, your own stack heals, and taking care of those people. Now you have that tool, you need that skill. So, moving on to CP. CP is pretty straightforward. It doesn't take too long to get through. The only hiccup here is if you have weaned yourself off of Bastion, off of your Hardened Ward or not. If you haven't, you want 100 points in Bastion, and you want to split the rest of your points between Hardy, Elemental Defender, Thick Skin, and Quick Recovery. Those last 4 stars, about evenly. You can skimp on the Thick Skinned. If you have, however, then a secondary benefit of weaning yourself off of that shield is that you can have a more balanced expenditure of your CP. So for instance, like content like Serpent Trials, where there's a massive amount of physical damage and poison damage, in the next patch I'll be able to put 97 points in Hardy and split the rest among Quick Recovery, Elemental Defender, and Thick Skinned, and be more tanky for that. Now if you don't want to have to keep resetting your CP every time to taper to the combat, go with a more even setup, something like 60 Hardy and split the rest. Maybe, you know, just whatever to taste you like. I personally like this allocation. There's less threat from the elemental damage towards spike. Most of your spike comes from physical damage. Anyway, that's not true of every case, but it's true of a lot of them. So if you don't want to keep resetting your CP, you know, kind of work it out that way. Anyway, moving on to the green tree, you're absolutely going to want as much points of Magician as possible. It's our best mana management star. The rest can go into Arcanist. Another option is to kick this down just a little bit, and this can probably stay, you know, maybe down to 50, and push some into Tenacity. Resto channels store a lot of mana, and you can weave them into your heal rotation pretty easily, and now they're going to give us 5 seconds of major mending, which is pretty important if we want to stay competitive with Templars. As such, having more mana return on those restos could be useful. You wouldn't want to put too many points in here. Just watch as it goes up, and the moment that it starts really tapering off in benefit, stop putting points into it. But Tenacity is worth looking into. Moving on, our apprentice tree is pretty straightforward. If you really want to sort of spec into your DPS role, you can cut your Elfborn down a little bit. It will hurt your crit heals just slightly, and you can boost up your spell erosion and your elemental expert a little bit. It really doesn't matter all that much. I go with this setup because I switch my builds around a lot, and it's real easy for me to shift and left click. So for the laziest of reasons. Anyway, that's it. That's CP allocation. It's pretty straightforward. So really the last thing to talk about in this build video is where do we stand against Templar? Now I know it seems strange to talk about a Templar in a Sorc guide video, but we can't compete with Templar competitively if we don't understand our deficits, why they're better than we are, why we're better than they are. And so by that train of thought, and combined with the train of thought that Zoss actually watches these videos, and if they know the deficit between the classes more clearly defined from a player's perspective, they have a better chance of balancing healing across the game. So with that in mind, we're going to talk about Sorcerer versus Templar, just for a little bit. So, it's kind of funny because we flip-flopped roles. It used to be that Sorcs killed Templars in stack healing. My Sorc raid healer just absolutely obliterated all Templars in stack healing. Let me show you something here. Just you gotta see this. Alright. Let's put this buff on, let's put that buff on. Look at these 6.1 heal crits. 6.1 heal crits on a freaking grand healing. Oh, I've seen Breath of Life that don't hit that much. Now, granted, I've also seen like 30k Breath of Life, but I mean, that's an exceptional amount of healing for a 4-tick skill. I'm getting 24k on an entire group over the course of 4 seconds with one cast. That's some massive healing that Sorc can pull off. We're about to get trounced in stack healing by Templars. Now, the Templar community is up in a rage right now because they feel like they've suffered a lot of nerfs, and that may be true, and there are a lot of problems with the Templar class, especially in PvP, but the major mending buff is not one of are one of them. That was a buff. You guys can say, well, we lost 5% healing. No, you really didn't. Yes, the number went down. It went from 30 to 25%, but let me explain a little something about that buff. You would put down your ritual, your little giant circle, right? And anyone standing in that circle got bonus healing from your resto line, your restoring light line only, your class heals only. That generally meant your breath of life and the purify itself. Those were the two heals you were getting that 30% bonus on. And you were only getting it versus people who were actually going to stand in that circle. If somebody walked out of the circle, hell, if somebody jumped up off the ground, they wouldn't even get that buff. Test it yourself. If you're off the ground when the heal hits you, you don't get the extended ritual, or you don't get that buff, basically. They're changing that to a personal buff to the Templar of major mending. So that means as long as the Templar is standing in his own circle, all heals that he does, his resto heals, fucking sword and board heals, stam abilities like vigor, any heal in the game is going to be boosted by 25%. This major mending buff was something that even made a DK healer even possible. They were banking on that major mending buff to put them in the game, to put them even with classes that don't get it. And now Templar has it with easy activation. Now, I'm not saying they shouldn't have it. I think it's great that they have it, but it's worth noting that now they have an easy access to major mending that puts their healing springs on par with my high spell power illustrious healing. You will see Templars hitting those 6k crits easy peasy on the stack heals. This absolutely puts Templar in the lead for stack heals. However, with the nerf to Breath of Life, compared to our own new pet Sorc heal, we actually overtook them in single target spike. We hit more targets, we hit harder with our heals. It's only slightly more expensive. Granted, it does have some hiccups on it, like brain. Come on, brain. You can do it. Technical difficulties. Like having to keep your pet alive, basically, can be problematic. That's a skill set that pet Sorcs are now going to have to deal with. You're going to have to babysit this humming little bird. Anyway, but I feel like we've overtaken the lead in spike heals. So we've kind of flip-flopped those roles, which is interesting to me. The next place that Templar beats us is bar allocation. Because we rely on more toggles to get our high heals, and because even though toggles are being worked out of the game, we still keep the crippling nature of toggles. The fact that if I summon this thing and then weapon swap to a bar without it, it goes away, means that I've kept some of the worst aspect of a toggle. This means that our bar space is limited, meaning that as a solo healer we can't run all of the buffs that we need, whereas a Templar easily can, because the heal boosters that they have are not slot hogs. One purifying ritual on one bar and they're good to go. So in that nature, in skill allocation, Templar is just a-okay. They have the ability to set up really strong bars, making them better group buff people. Anyway, the last place that Templar beats us is stamina management. They have access to repentance. Now granted, repentance is not so great in boss fights. It's amazing in trash pulls. They have blessed shards, absolutely necessary in some content. Now we can have our DPS run shards instead and get away with this a little bit, you know, but it's still some role that we can't actually accomplish. Now, talking to sort of Zenimax here, like this is probably the one that makes me the most salty. Not having something like blessed shards, and the reason for it is they aggressively attacked the competency of tanks and made it so that they rely heavily on support from the outside, but they only gave one class the ability to support that bar. Well, I don't think that's very fair. I mean, it's wrong on so many levels. First of all, you shouldn't have attacked the tank's competency. Yeah, it's not a tank. You're a stank. They shouldn't have attacked our competency first and foremost. And then if you are going to make it to where it's now a relationship between the healer and the tank, and the healer's supposed to support the tank's stamina bar, then you should have given all classes some kind of tool to support that tank's stamina bar. Now, as far as fixing this, suggestions, you could revert the change to blocking and make it to where tanks actually are functional again on their own. But I don't think that's going to happen just from the... I don't know. Anyway, I don't think that's going to happen. Another option is to give us some kind of skill that helps us do that. I mean, in the guild skills under Undaunted, we have Blood Altar. It's crap all, it does nothing. Allow it to do some kind of repentance-like thing, where bodies in the area cause a hot to magic and stamina to start ticking. A small one that's not linked to regen so that it can support someone who's blocking, and then cause the synergy to cash in those bodies for a large dump of stats similar to Repentance. That could be a redesign that would, don't make it as good as Repentance, that way Templars still have their sort of class-specific win, but give us something, and this is a good skill to do it in, because it's just sitting there. It's terrible. It's a terrible skill, no one wants it. It's a noob trap even. Anyway, moving on, another thing that you could do is to follow your precedent of taking the more popular morph, or one of the single morphs, and moving it to the base skill. You could very easily move Quick Siphon down to the base skill, so now the entire skill of Force Siphon is instant cast, including Siphon Spirit, and then create a new morph, maybe Siphon Fortitude, that does the exact same thing that Siphon Spirit does, but for stamina. You see, 1% stam return and the heal, instant cast. That would be great, because all non-Templar healers would now have an option towards supporting their group's stamina. That would be one way that you can change that. As far as bar allocations, how you could shore up that deficit, you could actually give us the nature of a no toggle system. If you're going to be taking away toggles, please don't leave us with vestigial penalties from toggles. Make it to where we can put this matriarch on an off bar and it doesn't desummon on a main bar, or put it on a main bar. Just make it to where it doesn't desummon when it's not on the bar. That way we can put it on our main bar and go to our off bar for buffs and heals and stuff, and then come back to our main bar and our pet's been out the whole time. We lose access to the Sorc heal if it's not on our bar. That's the penalty we pay. We don't need to pay this double penalty of having our pet unsummon. And if you're gonna keep this unsummon nonsense, then make summoning it an instacast so we can easily put it back up when we get back to our main bar. At least do something along those lines. As far as balancing up who's the better stack healer, I don't think you should. It's fine. Even though Templar is now past us in stack healing, we're still adequate stack healers. We haven't gotten weaker, and we were the best stack healer. Templar got stronger. So we're still boss stack healers, just because we're not the best anymore. I don't think you need to fix that. If anything, you need to look to DK and try to figure out some way that it can actually perform the role as a Templar on this particular issue. And pretty much for the whole stack heal issue, I think we're pretty even there. I would just that thing I talked about earlier of making it to where we can actually left click hit the modifier button and left click a square, making our pet go to that square. Make that change so that we have a little bit more control over the positioning our pet for these. Basically, I mean, that's a change that would help us so much as a raid Sorc because of all the one-shot mechanics. When the warrior jumps up in the air and I suddenly find that I'm standing in the circle, I can get out of it quickly, but my stupid pet just stands there. And I can try to keep him out of the way, but it's just a big hassle. It'd be so much easier if I can modify, click a square, and then dodge roll, and both me and my pet are running, Anyway, this concludes my Sorc Pet Heal Guide. I hope that my experience in Sorc healing has helped you on your way. I hope you have a lot of fun on Sorc Healer. You're gonna smile real big when somebody's like, wow, you did so good healing, and I'm happy for you. Again, if you like the video, hit a like. It really does help. If you want to follow my channel, I am starting to do channel specific updates, letting you know which direction the channel is going to be going and what I plan on doing in the future, so that you know what to expect ahead of time. And again, if you have any relevant forums or threads or just any social media where you think that this guide is relevant, or any of my guides, feel free to link my content and spread me around. I appreciate you guys.